Hey there, I'm Amy from thecrazycraftlady.com. Today I'm sharing some more Christmas in July crafts for you, all using one of my absolute favorite craft supplies, and that is the dollar store pizza pan. So these guys are still $1.25 for now, but they're such a great blank for making door hangers, but also lots of other different crafts. So come with me to see what I can make with these. Let's get making. For this craft, you're going to need not one, but two pizza pans, as well as a couple strings of wood beads. I just took them outside and I gave everything a coat with this Hunt Club green spray paint. You only need to paint around the edges of the back of the pizza pans, but you do need to paint all the way around the wood beads. So what I did is I put them on a piece of parchment paper and then sprayed one side, rolled them over, sprayed the other side, rolled them over, sprayed again. I did not get perfect coverage. You'll see it's totally fine if you don't get 100% perfect coverage here. But then I also flipped over the pizza pans and I sprayed the front of them, not full coverage because we're going to do a second coat of a different paint, but just a nice base coat. Then I wanted to make feet for my project, so I took a little wooden skewer and attached 4 wood balls, 4 wood beads with a tiny dab of hot glue right to the skewer. You just want them to stay in place while you're painting them and then be able to pop them off. So just like the tiniest dab of hot glue there. And then I grabbed a Dollar Tree makeup brush because it has really soft bristles that get in all the nooks and crannies, and some antique gold rub and buff. You're going to need a fair amount of rub and buff for this because we're going to also paint the pizza pans. But we'll start with the little wood beads here. So just use kind of a little circular motion with that makeup brush until you get complete coverage. And then you can see I can just easily pop the wood beads off that skewer, and I'm going to glue them to one of my pizza pans using a combination of E6000 and hot glue. You don't want them to mix, you just want them to be side by side. So the E6000 gives you the long-term permanent hold, but the hot glue gives you the quick instant hold so you can continue working on your project and you don't have to wait for that E6000 to set. But just space the 4 wooden beads evenly because they're going to be the little feet of our decorative tray here. And then I took my little wooden beads and I left them on the little twine string. That way they'd stay in a nice little row. And I only hot glued the ones in place where it's like, oh, a little bit of that red was showing. Let me make sure that faces back. I should have glued all of them, and you'll see why. I'll show you in a bit. But it all worked out. But you're just going to glue all the way around until the entire perimeter of that pizza pan lip there is covered in these green wood beads. And then it's time to put our 2 pizza pans together. So a little bit of E6000 glue, both on the wood beads and on the pizza pan. And then a generous dollop of hot glue right in the center of the pizza pan there. And then you press the 2 pizza pans together, and you'll see here you have a cute little bobbin edge on this decorative tray. How cute is that? But I wasn't going to just stop there because I wanted this to be a little bit more glam and gold. So I started with that same antique gold rub and buff and that same makeup brush from Dollar Tree. And I just very gently brushed back and forth. So it was almost going for a wood grain texture on this, only with gold. Brush back and forth in the same direction. Otherwise, I think it'll just look sloppy. So I'm going to speed this up considerably. You don't need to see this whole thing. But then once the center of the pizza pan was covered, then I brushed around the edge of the pizza pan in a circular motion to cover the edges there. And then it was time to paint the wood beads, and this is where some of them started spinning around as I was brushing them, you know, circular motion with your little makeup brush there and the antique gold rub and buff. So if I had this to do over, I would have just glued them all in place so they wouldn't spin, but it worked out just fine. I just ended up painting all the way around some of the wood beads as they spun as I was brushing. But then that is it. So a cute little green and gold. I'm in love with this Hunt Club green spray paint and antique gold rub and buff combo. I've used it on a bunch of different craft projects. So great. And then here's my decorative little tray on display. Okay, so we're gonna call this craft Watch Amy Spray Paint a Pizza Pan and then have a small breakdown. So I sprayed this pizza pan with this bare chiffon cream chalk paint, beautiful color. And then I cut out this Treats for Santa plate SVG on Cricut Design Space. So this is free if you have a Cricut Design Space. Otherwise, go on Etsy and search for SVGs. Cut it out on red Dollar Tree vinyl. And it was a little tricky because I didn't want to damage the spray painted surface. So I used contact paper instead of transfer tape. I also do this if I'm applying something to like paper. And so it's a little tricky to transfer, no problem. I'm used to that. I'm patient. I have my little tools. And then I went and centered it on the pizza pan and it would not stick. And I don't know if it's because I'm using Dollar Tree vinyl, which I normally don't use, although I've used it on glass surfaces, no problem. It was not sticking. Maybe it was like the texture from the spray paint. Who knows? If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments, because it would not stick. So, and it was like late at night. You can see my lighting here is not great. And so I grabbed some Mod Podge, just some plain matte Mod Podge, and I gave the whole pizza pan a coat with that in hopes of salvaging this project, because the thought of having to start over at 9 o'clock at night was just giving me some feelings that were not, as my children would say, tricky feelings. So I let that Mod Podge dry overnight, and then I went back and I reused, maybe it's because I reused the same vinyl. I didn't want to cut out more vinyl and waste. It transferred. Did not transfer great. It tested the bounds of my patience. And I've transferred some really tricky, tiny, detailed vinyl. And this took a while, so I'm not going to subject you to watching the whole thing. But I will say I got everything transferred over. Didn't miss any pieces. It worked. So maybe if you were to do this, do the Mod Podge first. Maybe don't use Dollar Tree vinyl. I don't know. Anyway, so then that was done. And then I wanted to add some detail because it looked really boring. And so I just pulled out my go-to 15mm wooden half balls. You're going to have to dry fit this twice. I'm sorry, there's no way around it. So one, I dry fit the wooden half balls all the way around my pizza pan to know how many I would need. And then I painted them red. And so what I do for that is I lay a piece of tape down on like a scrap cardboard or folder or whatever, and then lay that tape face up and then tape it down, and then stick your little wooden half balls to that tape. That way you can paint them all at once. So this is Folk Art matte paint in the color Christmas Red. I saw that at Hobby Lobby and I was like, hey, if it's called Christmas Red, it'll probably work on Christmas projects, right? And it did. I've used it twice now. And so I just used my flat 1-inch paintbrush, or you could use a pouncer brush, and you just want to paint at all angles. So up, down, left, right, come at it from all the way around. In fact, I would recommend rotating your scrap of cardboard there so that you can see from all angles. At one point, my daughter came up to me and she's like, missed a spot, Mom. And I was like, thank you. You're lucky. You're cute. And so I got those all painted. And then while those were drying, I didn't trust that vinyl to stay put. So I sealed the whole thing with another coat of matte Mod Podge. That way I know none of my vinyl is going to be coming up and causing me any problems later on. And then here's where you have to dry fit a second time before you glue, because you want to make sure you have the spacing right. So take all those little wooden half balls off the painter's tape and space them evenly all the way around the edge of the pizza pan. So it takes a minute, but I think it's worth it. I just love these bob and edge details so much. And then I just came back with my E6000 and did the tiniest little dab of glue on the back of each and every single little wooden half ball all the way around the pizza pan. So put on a podcast, put on a Netflix movie. I swear, one of these days I'm going to make a compilation video of crafts to make while you're watching Netflix because they're so time intensive, but totally worth it. But then here's my finished little Treats for Santa jumbo plate. Obviously not food safe, okay, but still a super cute decoration. And like, if you're gonna set out milk and cookies on Christmas Eve, I mean, kids, cover your ears. It's not like anyone's actually gonna eat the milk and cookies that sat out all night, so what does it matter? But here's my finished craft. All right, here we're gonna take a pizza pan, flip it over. We're gonna paint the back. This is my go-to white, linen white Rust-Oleum chalk paint. And sad days, this can of paint that has lasted me for upwards of 50 projects. I swear, a little bit goes a long way. I think this is the end of the can. It was the bottom of the can. The paint was going on super thick. I had to spray a ton of water to get it to go on smooth, and there's just so little left in the bottom. It's like the end of an era. Like, this can of chalk paint and I have been together for so long. I'm not gonna say I'm gonna get emotional over a can of paint, but you know, I'm pretty close. And then I did not trust myself to freehand this design. So I will make this a free printable if you want it. I just went into Canva, and you have to print it out on 4 pieces of paper because it's so big. But I really wanted perfectly evenly spaced spirals to make a peppermint design. So I had to trim this down to size and haphazardly put it together. I'm working on a Minnesota jumbo state map, which hopefully I'll be able to share with you next month. So I'm getting more comfortable with printing things out on a bajillion pieces of paper and like taping them together and then doing the image transfer. If you don't want to go through all this, just freehand a spiral design however you like on your pizza pan. But then once I had all that pieced together, I centered it on my pizza pan. I found it easiest to flip it over so you could kind of see the ink on the back of the paper. And then I secured it in 4 spots, which was silly of me because I didn't leave myself a spot to slide that carbon transfer paper in. So I had to undo one of the 4 little pieces of tape, my bad, and then slide that carbon transfer paper in very gently because you don't want much of that carbon to rub off on the white paint. Alternatively, you could just scribble all over the back of the paper with pencil and then trace over, and then that will transfer that pencil onto the pizza pan. The choice is yours. And then I grabbed my folk art matte paint in Christmas Red, which is perfect for this peppermint. Like, they nailed the color. Folk art matte Christmas Red. And I used a fine point paintbrush and I painted over all of those lines. So you don't want any of that carbon transfer line showing. So just paint just over the line and then fill everything in. And I ended up doing 2 coats and I got really great coverage. So I'll speed this up because this took a minute. And then I wanted to seal everything. I had originally planned on using my regular matte Mod Podge, but I was like, well, what if I set this outside? Like, I wouldn't set this out like exposed to snow and rain, but maybe under a covered porch. So I went with outdoor Mod Podge. But after using matte Mod Podge, this stuff is really thick and really shiny. Like, I understand there's a need for it, but not my favorite. But I got that all sealed there. And then I had to figure out a way to put this on a stake, right? So I grabbed this dowel. It was 4 feet long. I just cut off a foot of it. So I had about a 3 foot long dowel, and it's maybe like 1/4 inch in diameter. And then I also painted that with my Christmas Red matte paint. And for this, I just laid down some parchment paper so I could paint all the way around the dowel at once and not have to worry about coming back, painting one side, coming back, painting the other. And then we're going to embellish with a bow. I know black and white check ribbon is not everyone's jam, so use what you want. But we're just going to make 2 figure eights. So I make 1 figure eight, pinch it in the center. Then make a second figure eight and pinch that in the center. And make sure you leave tail ends on either side. And then this is a way just to make a super simple fluffy bow. It helps if you use wired ribbon, of course. And this is like 2-inch ribbon. And then I wrap it in the center with just some floral wire 4 or 5 times, give it a twist, and then snip off those tail ends. And then from there, you can trim the tail ends of your bow. I do a kite tail end, so I fold it in half and cut it at a 45-degree angle to make a cute little kite tail. And then you want to cover that floral wire in the center of the bow, so I just cut a small piece of ribbon and tie it in a knot. Cover it over the floral wire and then tie it in a knot in the back. Then I just grabbed a lighter and very carefully heat seal the ends of your ribbon there so it doesn't fray. And you got a bow. And we have to assemble. And I didn't think this round wooden dowel was going to stick very nicely to the front of this pizza pan because of that lip there. So here was my workaround. I grabbed a paint stir stick, regular paint stir stick. They come in packs of 10 at the paint counter at Home Depot. I used my miter shears and I cut off the little handle piece because it was just a little bit too long. And so that elevated my dowel just enough that it could sit flat on the front of the pizza pan. And so the way I got the dowel to stick to the paint stick piece was I ran dots of E6000 down the center of the paint stick. And I was pretty generous with the glue here. And then I also added in between those dots of hot glue. Then I set the dowel down, and then I didn't fully trust the glue. P.S. If you have a better method for doing this, please let me know in the comments section. I was kind of stumped. From there, I just took 2 zip ties, and I tied them real tight around the dowel and the paint stick, so hopefully that those will stay in place. And then I flipped that over and I did the same thing with dabs of E6000 and dabs of hot glue on the back of that paint stick piece, and then secured that right to the back of the pizza pan in the center. I hope it sticks. If not, I'll have to switch to plan B. Maybe a bunch of duct tape, but that'll just be nasty looking. But anyway, and then I flipped that over and I just hot glued my bow right to the base of that peppermint circle there, and that's it. I didn't know how to photograph this because it's July and it's 80 degrees out and I obviously don't have like my evergreen planter pot out front. So I just stuck this next to a couple of Christmas trees, but I think this would look great in like a planter pot by your front door, like maybe under a covered porch, or make 2 and make a smaller one using a pie pan. Now the gears are turning, so I need to stop. All right, normally I craft with the silver Dollar Tree faux tin tiles, the little peel and stick ones, but on my last trip to Dollar Tree, they didn't have the silver ones, but they did have these new blue and white ones, so we're gonna give these a go. You're gonna grab both a dollar store pizza pan and a pie pan because we're gonna cover them both with this faux tin tile, so you need 2 faux tin tiles as well. And you're gonna use the labels from both to cut out the tin tile. So I start by just removing the adhesive backing because it's only secured around those 4 corners. So once you cut that circle out, the adhesive backing is going to fall off. So I find it easier just to trace without the backing on, right on the back of the tile. So center it and then trace with a Sharpie all the way around. I'm going to speed this up quite a bit because you don't need to see me doing all this. The gist is you trace the pizza pan label, flip it over, trace it again, do the same thing with the pie pan label, and then cut it all out with scissors. And then here I had my 2 little circles that I'm going to glue on to the back of both my pizza pan and my pie pan. So I'm just going to use a little bit of E6000 around the edges, a couple dabs in the center, and then the tiniest bit of hot glue because you don't want to melt this plastic because this is not real tin tile, it's plastic tin tile. And then smooth that right onto the back of the pizza pan. And then I'm going to repeat that exact same process with a little bit of E6000, a little bit of hot glue on the pie pan as well. Hot glue for instant hold, E6000 for long-term permanent hold. And then it's time to assemble our snowman here. So we're going to make a base. I just hot glued an E6000, a wood block to a jumbo paint stir stick. So not the regular kind, but the really long kind. get them at the paint aisle at Home Depot. You pay like $2 for a packet of them. I had to set a book underneath my pie pan to elevate it, or under my pizza pan, to elevate it so it'd match the pie pan. And then we're gonna glue that jumbo paint stir stick right to the back of the pie pan and the pizza pan, because here you're going to see I hot glued the pie pan and the pizza pan together, and it made for a really wobbly neck, and I thought Mr. Frosty was going to be decapitated, so I had to support his back with that paint stick. Then I just painted everything white. So this is my go-to plain linen white Rust-Oleum chalk paint. I have a big can of it. It's actually getting to the bottom, and I went to Home Depot and they didn't have any. So either I have to order some on Amazon or I have to switch to a different go-to white chalk paint, and I'm kind of nervous. Anyway, pouncer brush and paint all over the whole thing. If you do a pretty thick coat, you can get one coat coverage. Yeah, some of the silver and blue will kind of show through, but you can't tell it's blue, so I don't go for perfect coverage. I think it actually looks better when it's not fully solid white. Now it's time to add the face and the button details. So I just grabbed a fine point paintbrush and my plain black chalk paint, and I made the little coal eyes and the smile. So I just kind of outlined at first little ovals and then filled them in. Take your time, it gets a little tricky making like a perfect oval shape over that bumpy tin tile surface. So I find it easy to come at it with your paintbrush at several different angles, just so you can get even looking ovals that don't look too bumpy or wavy or wonky. And then I also distressed around the edges of the pie pan, because we're not going to add a hat or anything. The edges looked a little sad and unfinished. So imagine you're painting like a faux enamelware project, which I've done before, where you just kind of brush the edge of your paintbrush along the edges of the pans, and it just kind of distresses the edges and gives the project a little bit more dimension. And then I came in with a combination, I don't even remember what these paint colors are, sorry. It was like a pumpkin orange and then like a coral pinkish orange. And when I mix those two together, I've done this on several projects, especially when painting pumpkins, it gives me that perfect muted farmhouse orange color and not the bright pumpkin orange that you would see like in kids' craft projects. And so for this, I just kind of mixed the two together and painted a series of ovals that got smaller and smaller as they went. And that kind of mimicked the shape of a carrot nose for my snowman. Then I wanted Mr. Snowman to hold something, and I had this little sign from however many Thanksgivings ago from Dollar Tree, and I thought I was going to use the front of it, but after trying to pry off those three-dimensional letters, I realized it's going to rip the paper's going to be bumpy, even if I paint over it, it's going to look bumpy. This doesn't work. So I actually ended up flipping that little sign over completely and using the back. And so that's like cardstock backing, which was perfect to paint. So I just used a fine point paintbrush and black chalk paint, and I painted that whole back. And the reason why I'm using a fine point paintbrush is because I was able to kind of press down on that cardboard backing and get right up to the edge of the gold frame without actually touching the gold frame. So I had a crisp, even rectangular border finish there. And then I just went into my Cricut and I printed off the words, "Let it snow." If you don't have a Cricut, you could freehand this. You could do an image transfer off your printer and then carbon transfer paper and then paint over it with white chalk paint, but I just went the quick route and used my Cricut, and then I just used transfer tape to transfer those letters right onto my little sign that I'm then going to give the snowman to hold. And the snowman can't hold anything without hands, so I just Googled like mitten outline image and I printed it off, and then I took some gray felt, I folded it in half so I had double layers because our snowman needs two hands, and then I very carefully with craft scissors cut through all the layers of the printer paper template and the two layers of felt. I stuck a foam mounting square or like a piece of heavy duty double-sided tape underneath that paper template just so it did stick nicely to the felt, and then cut the arms longer than you think they're going to need to be because we want them to wrap all the way around the back of the pizza pan. So here are my finished mittens, and I'm just going to drape them over each side of the sign that I must have hot glued in a different step and not shown you, sorry. And so I'm just going to hot glue those mittens down. And then from there, oh no, I didn't hot glue the sign. Just kidding. Hot glue the sign too, you guys. Otherwise, it's gonna fall off when you flip your project over. My bad. I just hot glued that thing down, and then I was able to flip the whole project over and then hot glue the ends of the little mitten arms there onto the back of the pizza pan. And then I just had this piece of fabric, and it wasn't long enough to make a scarf, so I just cut 2 strips of this plaid fabric with my craft scissors, and then married them up on the back of the snowman. So I hot glued both ends facing in opposite directions so that they would come around the front and look like a full-length scarf. So then you can flip the snowman back over there. And I actually wrapped that around a second time. And then I cut that extra piece off and hot glued it underneath the scarf. It's kind of convoluted. And then I made little kite tails at the end by folding the strip of fabric in half and cutting at a 45-degree angle. And then you might want to pinch or fold the fabric so it lays exactly at the right angle, or you could add a tiny dab of hot glue and hot glue those scarf ends to the top of that picture frame. But that's it, my cute little faux tin tile Christmas snowman. For this craft, I started with 4 little wood beads. They're going to be the 4 feet of my tray here. I'm using my go-to combination of E6000 and hot glue. You just set them right next to each other on each of the wood beads and space them evenly on the bottom of a pizza pan. And then I just came in with this navy chalk paint. It's from Folk Art. But you're going to want to pick, I'm going to show you the gift wrap that I'm going to embellish this pizza pan with. Pick a chalk paint color that coordinates with your gift wrap or scrapbook paper or whatever you're using. I just chose blue. But you want to make sure you paint all the way around the edge of the pizza pan as well as the whole underside of it. So in around that lip, and then the whole bottom of the pizza pan as well as the 4 little wood bead feet of your tray here. And you might have to go back and do a second coat if you don't get complete coverage on the first time. But then flip that pizza pan over, and we're going to add a coat of Mod Podge. I'm almost always use matte Mod Podge. That's just my go-to. But use whatever you got. Just a solid layer right inside the center of the pizza pan. You don't have to do the edge there because we're going to cover that with something else. But then let that Mod Podge dry. And then we're going to cut a circle of decorative gift wrap to embellish the center of the tray. So you'll see here, this is why I chose that blue, navy blue chalk paint. So use the label from the pizza pan to cut your template or to cut your little circle of gift wrap. So you have to do it 1/2 at a time. So trace with Sharpie on 1/2 and then flip that label over to the other side and trace it again so you have a total circle that matches exactly your pizza pan size, and then just cut that out. Now, if you don't have gift wrap that you like, you could easily use a sheet of scrapbook paper. 12 by 12 scrapbook paper will fit, or like decorative vinyl or anything else like that. And then once that Mod Podge had dried, key point, let the Mod Podge dry. We're going to heat press that gift wrap down. So center the gift wrap on the pizza pan, protect your work surface or protect your gift wrap with a sheet of parchment paper. And then I used my mini heat press, or you could use an iron with no steam to heat set, and that will reactivate the Mod Podge underneath the gift wrap paper there, and you'll get a perfectly smooth, no bubbles finish, and the gift wrap will be secured down to the pizza pan. And so now we need to cover the edge of the pizza pan. So I just grabbed some Dollar Tree jute rope. I cut the end at a 45-degree angle and started hot gluing. So I started on the edge and worked the outer edge and worked my way in, just hot gluing every few inches at intervals as I went. And I ended up using 1.5 packets of jute rope to get my complete coverage here. So I just hot glued all the way around. You'll see here when I got to the second row, you just kind of like hot glue and then slide in a little bit and then start your second row. And then keep hot gluing on your merry little way. And then when I reached the end of my first piece of jute rope, I cut it at a 45-degree angle and I hot glued it down to the pizza pan. From there, I then grabbed my second package of jute rope and I also cut that end at a 45-degree angle, and then you can marry up those two 45-degree angles to get a smoother, more flush finish that isn't as stark or disjointed. And then also when you get to the very end and all of that silver rim is covered, you can then cut the end of the jute rope at a 45-degree angle and hot glue it down, and then you're in business. You could also add jute rope handles if you wanted to. I have done that on previous projects. I just didn't do it here. But here's my cute little decorative Christmas tray, perfect for displaying little vignettes or as a centerpiece on a table. You'll just start by opening up your tin tile piece and removing that adhesive backing, since we're going to be cutting the tile down to match the size of the pizza pan. The adhesive backing will fall off anyway because it's only secured around the 4 edges. And then use that little label on the pizza pan as your template to trace on the back of the faux tin tile with a Sharpie marker. So I just did each half, just traced it, and then use a pair of craft scissors to cut just inside that Sharpie marker line. And then you can set the tile in place, and if something looks a little lopsided, you can give it a little trim there. But then I just glued the tin tile piece with E6000 right inside the pizza pan. Sometimes I'll add a couple dabs of hot glue for more instant hold, but you just have to be careful because this faux tin tile is actually plastic, so it'll melt if you use too much hot glue. Then I made a little topper for the ornament, and I just used a wooden paint stir stick and my miter shears. You have to be kind of strong to get this to cut. I cut it at, I think, like a 30-degree angle. I will say the miter shears work way better on smaller things like popsicle sticks, but you just have to score it a few times, cut from one angle, then cut the other side, and back and forth until the paint stick eventually snaps. And then I cut another smaller piece. So they're just going to stack one on top of the other. And then to make them stick together, I used, a popsicle stick, way easier. You don't cut in one go. But 2 little pieces of a wooden craft stick there that I just hot glued to the back of my paint sticks. And I feel like this really kind of mimics the shape of a hanger for a real ornament, just on a larger scale. Next up, it was time to paint. So I did 3 different types of paint. So first, my base coat on the majority of my projects is just plain white Rust-Oleum chalk paint. I almost treat this chalk paint more as a primer than as an actual paint. And then I used just some gray, I think this is Deco Art, like folk art, home decor chalk paint in the color Maui Sand, like Hawaii, Maui. Painted the top of the ornament piece there, and then once that first coat of white Rust-Oleum paint had dried, I went back with my Waverly moss colored chalk paint and painted the whole pizza pan tin tile combo there. I recently just used the same exact color combo on a tin tile Christmas tree cutout, and so I was inspired to kind of stick with the same color theme. On the Christmas tree one though, I just did green and gold paint. This time I added a step in between, which you'll see here, and I went back with that gray chalk paint that I used on the little ornament topper there. Very dry brush technique, so pounce off your brush on a piece of scrap paper or something beforehand. And I just kind of layered in. Some spots I did more, some spots I did less, and just kind of distressed the tin tile with the gray paint. And then once that paint had dried, I went in with my antique gold rub and buff on a little piece of a dish sponge, so you can just throw it away when it's done, and then layered in the gold paint as well, just on the raised edges and parts of that tin tile, and then around the edge of the pizza pan as well. And then to make a hanger, I just used a little bit of natural jute twine. This stuff has a little gold floss running through it, but you could just use regular twine as well. I knotted it at the top, did a simple braid all the way down, and then knotted it at the bottom, and then just hot glued everything together for my hanger. So there's that paint stick hanger. First, I hot glued the ends of my braid to the back of that paint stick hanger. And then I had to trim the tail ends down to size because I made my braid a little bit long, maybe could have made it a little shorter, and then just hot glue that whole thing to the top of the pizza pan, and there is your general shape for your jumbo ornament. You could leave the project as is here, but I decided to embellish with some greenery and some ribbon. So I just kind of played around and I just took some sprigs of faux greenery, stuck them, under the ridge between the lip of the pizza pan and my little paint stick topper there, and then hot glued everything in place once I had it arranged the way I like it. And then to make a simple satin bow, I just do the bunny ear method. So 1 loop, 2 loop, and then tie them with a simple knot, the 2 loops together, and then make sure your tail ends are pointing down before you tighten the bow, and that's it. And here is my finished jumbo Christmas ornament made from dollar store supplies. All right, for this craft, you're gonna wanna start out with your pizza pan and some 15mm wooden half balls. I buy these on Amazon. I've probably ordered these 5 or 6 times by now because I've used them on just like so many projects, but I will link to them in the video description. Sometimes if I'm being extra particular, I'll dry fit these in place first, but on this one I just glued them directly on the edge of the pizza pan using a little bit of E6000. And then once that glue had dried a little bit, I gave everything a quick coat of white spray primer. And then I followed that up with my Waverly, I think it's crimson red chalk paint. Waverly brand is just from Walmart. And looking back on this, I probably could have gone out and bought red spray paint, but I really don't mind painting. It's kind of relaxing for me. And this definitely takes a little bit of time to get in all the nooks and crannies around the wooden half balls. So if you're less patient or you don't enjoy painting, spray paint might be the way to go on this one. Once that red paint had completely dried, I added a coat of matte Mod Podge just inside the center of the pizza pan. I like matte Mod Podge paired with chalk paint just so that if there's an area that's not covered by the image that we're going to put over the Mod Podge that you'll see in a second, it's not really noticeable on the chalk paint where there's overlap. And then for my image, I just grabbed this 2025 calendar from Dollar Tree. And I really liked the image on the December page, so I just peeled that off and flipped my pizza pan over. I secured the image in place with some painter's tape just while I trace that circle there. So I kind of used my fingers to mark a crease so I could see where I needed to draw This isn't a very precise method. I'm sorry, I don't have like a better way, I guess. And then I just kind of marked with a fine point Sharpie around the edge of the entire pizza pan. And then I just cut out my image. And so make sure you cut right inside your pen or your Sharpie marker line so that none of that ink shows on your finished project. And then the Mod Podge was completely dry here. If you try to put this calendar paper on wet Mod Podge, it wrinkles and curls and bubbles horribly. So I just use the heat press method. So I have this mini heat press in my craft room. If you don't have a heat press, an iron with no steam works just fine. I just protect my paper with some parchment paper, not wax paper, just parchment paper. And then the heat from the heat press reactivates the dried Mod Podge and you get a smooth finish with your decoupage there. Then I embellished with a bow. So I do the bunny ears method. So 1 loop, 2 loop, tie them in a knot. Make sure the tail ends are both pointing down before you fully tighten the bow. So finish off the tail ends with a little kite tail finish. So I just fold the tail end in half and then cut at a 45-degree angle. And the main reason why I made this bow was because there's a little hole at the top of the calendar page that you can see there. So I figured I could just hot glue a bow right in place to cover that up. And then to make a hanger, I grabbed that same 2-inch, 1.5-inch ribbon that I made my bow with, and then some 1/2-inch ribbon. So 3 pieces of whatever ribbon or scrap fabric that you have, tie it in a knot on one end, tape it to your work surface, and then braid all the way down. So make this as long or as short of a hanger as you want, and then just knot on the other end. So you have 2 knots on each end, or 1 knot on each end, so that your braid doesn't come undone. And then just flip that pizza pan over and hot glue each knot right to the back of the pizza pan in that little lip there. And there's your hanger for your pizza pan Christmas door hanger. So I grabbed a pizza pan from Dollar Tree and some more spray primer. I flipped it over and I just sprayed the outer rim of the pizza pan. This was in an abundance of caution. You maybe could skip this step, but I went with it anyway. Then I took a piece of peel and stick wallpaper in that white shiplap kind of rustic weathered wood pattern. I set it on top of the pizza pan and I smoothed over the edges to make a crease. And then I just used nonstick scissors to trim that circle out. And I trimmed about a 1/2 inch outside of that rim. It does not have to be perfect. We're going to cover it with greenery, but just smooth that piece of wallpaper right over the pizza pan. And then with that extra 1/2 inch lip, take your scissors and every 1.5 inches or so, cut a little slit in the edge of that wallpaper and then smooth those edges down. By cutting the slits, you're able to kind of like get those pieces to overlap a little bit so you don't have wrinkly edges with your wallpaper. And then this wallpaper was just a little too small to cover the whole back of the pizza pan, so I had to cut a little semicircle out of a second piece of wallpaper to finish off covering the back of my pizza pan. And then I went into Cricut Design Space and I fell in love with this cut file for this 25 days until Christmas countdown. So I just cut it out of plain black adhesive vinyl. I know not everyone has a Cricut, so I will say I have made a pizza pan countdown clock before. And what I did that time is I just painted. I painted all the numbers on. I did like an outline with pencil beforehand and then filled it in with a fine point paintbrush and did the numbers. So that's totally an option. Or you could use number stickers or like wood cutout numbers from the craft store or dollar store as well. But I will link to the exact cut file in Cricut Design Space if you are interested in that. And then to cover up the edge of the pizza pan, I just used some of this faux greenery. I will link to a very, very similar product on Amazon. I've had this for a few years in my craft stash. I'm trying to use it up. But I just added hot glue all the way around. It didn't stick very well, obviously, because it's metal. So you may want to do a combination of hot glue and E6000. Hot glue gets it to stick right away, and obviously the E6000 is that permanent long-term hold. But just one layer of this greenery all the way around. And if you're using a hot glue gun, that silicone fingertip protector is an absolute lifesaver. And then it's time to make the little arrow for your clock. So I just took a regular popsicle stick and my heavy-duty craft scissors. They're Fiskars brand. I love them for cutting things like popsicle sticks and wooden craft sticks. I cut a angled point on one end and then just like a straight 90-degree angle on the other end. And then I came back in with this Modern Masters metallic paint collection in brass paint that I used on those holiday bells earlier. And I painted that whole popsicle stick and the sides as well. And then once that paint had dried, just added a dab of hot glue to the back with a magnet. So then you can stick the little arrow on your pizza pan clock and spin it around as you count down to Christmas. All right, I'm going to share another countdown craft because I think they're just so much fun. I started with a pizza pan and I just spray painted the edges with white spray primer. And then I just came in with a light brown chalk paint. I know you can see in the upper left-hand corner my scrapbook paper that I'm going to use to embellish this. They look very different in this lighting. They don't look like they match, but in real life, it's hardly noticeable. So I don't know what was going on. Maybe it's because I was using like a ring light because I was painting this in the evening. Who knows? But you just paint all the way around the edge of the pizza pan. And then you want to cut out your scrapbook paper. So I just use this cute little like gingerbread type snowflake pattern. Lay the label from the pizza pan down, trace one half, then flip it over, and then trace around the other half with your Sharpie marker until you have a complete circle. And then you can just grab your craft scissors and cut that circle out very easily. And then I grabbed my flat 1-inch paintbrush and my matte Mod Podge. Any type of Mod Podge will work. And I just added a whole coat of Mod Podge to the back of my pizza pan there. You don't need to paint over that paint, that craft paint, that brown paint there. Just that center part where we're going to put our piece of scrapbook paper. And then you'll use this later, but I had this little wood ring. It's like 1.5 inches. And I just painted it white. I had to do a couple coats because I was using cheap Dollar Tree paint. My bad. Should have used chalk paint. And then it's time to heat press that piece of paper in place. So cover the paper with parchment paper and then use your little mini heat press or an iron with no steam. This is going to reactivate that dried Mod Podge so you get a perfect smooth finish with no bubbles. Even with thick, like this was really thick cardstock scrapbook paper. I'm just not going to risk it. Like I could have put this on when it was wet, but it's just so much easier to do the heat press method. I don't think I'll ever go back. Then I just went into Cricut Design Space and I cut out this Christmas countdown on black vinyl. And I was worried about damaging my scrapbook paper, so I didn't use transfer tape. I just used contact paper. So I just buy clear contact paper at Dollar Tree, and it seems to be gentler. It's a little trickier to smooth down and get your vinyl to stick to it. So getting it onto the contact paper is a little bit trickier, but I just feel so much more confident that I'm not going to damage my scrapbook paper when I transfer the black vinyl onto it. And so here I just centered my little vinyl cutout and smooth that down. And then I can smooth this down confidently and knowing I'm not going to damage my scrapbook paper at all. And then peel that transfer tape or that contact paper away. And then we have to embellish the edge. You could use ribbon. You could do 3 types of ribbon braided together, jute rope, but I like to do this little greenery. It's like a faux greenery. I got it on Amazon. I'll link to it below. But I use my silicone fingertip protector so I don't burn myself, and just hot glue dabs of glue every few inches around the edge of the pizza pan, and then just smooth that greenery down. And then I don't know what happened. Y'all, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry, forgive me. I must have zoomed in on my camera and not noticed, and I got like out of frame, and I wasn't at the right spot on my craft desk. So you can kind of see what I'm doing, where I cut these little pieces of a magnet strip and stuck it to the back of that wood ring there. The first one didn't work out. I had to cut it more. It couldn't be a rectangle. It had to have curved edges. Otherwise, you'd be able to see the magnet from the front, which was no good. So, sorry. You can just imagine that I hot glued 4 little pieces of magnet strip to the back of that wood ring, and that was enough magnet to get it to stick to the pizza pan. And then I finished this off with this, it's like twine, but it's like bigger, like brown and white baker's twine, but it's thicker than baker's twine. Anyway, I just tied a bow around that little wood ring, and then I measured a length so that like the wood ring could go anywhere on the pizza pan. And then I just made a little double knot at the end of my little twine there and hot glued that knot right to the back of the pizza pan. That way you don't lose your little wood ring. It doesn't fall off and go missing. And then you can move the little wood ring onto any number on your countdown. So how cute is this little Christmas countdown? And here are all of my finished Christmas pizza pan crafts in one place. I do hope you enjoyed watching these projects come together. Until next time, happy making.